Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
Hey everyone, Sue here at 1A Auto, and today we're doing front brakes on our 07 Mazda 3 sedan. If you need these parts or any other parts for your car, click on the link below and head on over to 1aauto.com. So we're going to loosen the lug nuts with the weight of the car on the tire, and it's a 21 millimeter. Let's see if this is any. So now you're going to raise the vehicle with a jack and jack stands or a 2-post lift if you have that. And now I can take the lug nuts off. It's up in the air. We're going to replace the caliper because the bleeder screw broke. And when we opened the bleeder screw to do the front brake service, the bleeder screw snapped off, so I have to replace the caliper. In the process, I have to replace the flex hose. So we're going to do the caliper now. I already did the flex hose. I used a pair of hose pliers. They're made of plastic, and they just squeeze rubber hoses tight so that the fluid would stop dripping out. I only recommend using these on a new hose, not an older hose if the hose has tons of mileage on it. When you squeeze it, they're already probably brittle on the inside, and you could be doing a lot more damage. So you can also use a rubber boot, cap it off on the bottom, or you just don't want to run your master cylinder all the way out. So use your discretion. I'm going to remove the anti-rattle clip. It's a spring, and it goes in these little ear holes. Oh, just the other side, just because it's the spring, they just slide in. I'm going to show you how to reinstall the new one when we get to that point. So with that out of the way, now I can take the slider bolts out. These are Allen heads, 7 millimeter Allen heads, and they're mounted in the back. You have a top and a bottom. Move to the bottom one. That slider right out of there, show you what it looks like. So that's a slider pin for this particular design, Mazda. There's your Allen head, and there's 2 of them. Now I'm just going to pry it out. I'm just using a little small pry bar. The inner pad will stay with the caliper because it's got the clips that sit inside the piston. Don't forget the hose is disconnected, so fluid will come out. I'm just going to pour it out. Let me see if I can get the rest of the fluid out. Normal case of a brake job is you take the caliper off like we just did. See, there's the bleeder screw, it broke off flush inside. So if this bleeder screw did not break, I would not have taken the hose off. This would be hanging up there, and you just, the outer pad just comes right out. The inner pad is got these three little spring ears on it. Just pull it out, pry it out, and now with that would be up in the car. I would open the bleeder screw, break it open, and then I would push this piston back to its bottom seat. So it seats, and then I would close the bleeder screw. Then I would clean my sliders, re-lube them, put the fresh pads in. I'm going to remove the caliper bracket, 17 millimeter socket for both of these mounting bolts to the knuckle. just going to take both of them all the way out. Beautiful. So there we have our bracket. If I wasn't replacing the caliper that I'm replacing with does come with a new bracket, I would take a wire brush and I would clean where the pads seat. Do not apply caliper grease or silicone grease. You want those clean as a whistle because there's no tins going on this bracket. The pad itself just rides right in there. So if you put grease or any silicone grease in there, it just attracts the dirt and will stop the pads from sliding back and forth freely. I'm going to take the old rotor off. I take a wire brush to the hub, clean it from any rust or foreign material, because we want that new rotor to sit flush with this hub and have no interference with the brake pedal. Now I'll just take some brake parts clean, spray that hub down, and wipe it. Here we have our new rotor and pads from oneauto.com, and here are the pads and rotor that we took off of this 07 Mazda 3 sedan. The new pads and rotors come with about 10-30 seconds thickness on the pads. They have the nice slanted on each section. That stops a chatter or a squeal, and they have very deep cooling fin. That just lets the fluid, the air, cool the pad down. And with this machined like this, that stops the brake dust from building up and filling up the center. The rotor itself is cross milled, which is a high quality mill. So if you need this part or any other part for your car, click on the link below and head on over to oneauto.com. Now I'm going to apply a high temp anti-seize to the hub. Just needs a thin coat all the way around before I put the new rotor on. Just stops rust buildup as the car goes down the road. This is good practice. I'm going to put the rotor on. I already cleaned it with brake parts clean to take the oil coating off for the shipping. Now we're going to mount the caliper. Before I install my new caliper, I'm going to take these boots off and take the sliders off and the bracket from the caliper. Let's see, oh, that one's already off. Okay, now we separated the caliper from the bracket. I'm going to install the bracket first before the caliper. The reason I do this, even though it's new, I like to put my silicone paste on here, even though they rebuilt it and they did it themselves. I'm going to make sure that there's a lot of good water resistant lube in there after I install the bracket. So now I'm going to reinstall the bracket, line up my mounting bolts. There we go. 17mm socket. We'll tighten that down and we'll get the torque specs. I'm going to torque the bracket to the knuckle. The 17mm is 75 foot-pounds. Before I install the caliper on the bracket, I'm putting some water-resistant silicone paste inside here. I'm not going to put the sliders on, but I am going to put the pad in place. I'm going to show you how to do that. So I like to guide the bottom in first, then center both sides and push her on in. There you go. Now this outer pad goes on the bracket, then I'll slide this over. Here's the outer pad, and it's formed right to that bracket. And now you can see why I said if you're not installing a new caliper and you're using your old caliper, why you want those guides clean of rust, debris, or grease. This is what that pad will do as you apply the pedal and take your foot off the brake. They slides back and forth with the pressure of the caliper. The new one, just gonna slide right in. Gonna get the 2 mounting bolts and mount it up. Here we have our caliper slider guides pins. This is a 7mm. I feel like that started. I'm gonna put the top one on. Caliper slider pins, torque spec is 22 foot-pounds with my 7mm Allen socket. I'm going to move down to the bottom. The good thing about this caliper, it comes with these waterproof caps. Keeps the debris out and water, road salt from those slider pins. I'll reinstall those. Now I'm ready to put the outside spring on. New hardware, please. Even if you're using the old caliper, it costs pennies compared to putting the old spring on. These do have tension to them, so even though it's not broken, it might not have the proper tension. So I guide the top slot in, then I'm going to put the bottom one in. Sometimes you use a little bit of a hammer to tap that in, because you can't mount it like that. So it's easier to put that in and then slide the spring up. Now holding that firmly, I'm going to use my hand and pry it over. There we go. Now both springs are on that caliper. I'm going to let that sit like that. Once I get the hose attached and I pump the brakes up, I'll reassemble that just by reassure it's in by tapping it with a hammer, but the pads have got to be seated at that point. Load my vehicle, and now I'm at my master cylinder. And like everything, you check your manufacturer specs. This does say right on the cap, only .3 fluid, which I have. And now I'm going to top that off. Then I'll pump my brakes up and start my bleed. Always reinstall the cap. You never want dirt, debris, any foreign substance to fall in. This will also be a good time to check for any leaks, to make sure all the hoses were closed properly. Now I'm going to go open the bleeder screws and gravity bleed. I've taken the cap back off, and I'm going to double check top off my brake fluid because the new caliper got filled. I don't want to open the bleeder screw without making sure that I have enough fluid. Now I can go to the right front and open the bleeder screw. The bleeder screw on this particular car is an 8mm wrench or socket. We're just going to let the gravity bleed and the fluid will come out. It's very important at this point not to pump the brakes. Now we're just going to let the fluid come out and gravity bleed. Hopefully get all the air out. I am going to go to the other side after and bleed that side also because we replaced the caliper over there. In hydraulics, it's good to do them as a pair for equal stopping power. Even if one isn't visually bad, if it's older, the piston could be slower than the newer one, and you'll have different pressures. I'm going to close this now and check my fluid. I'm ready to put the tires on. I'm going to top off my fluid right to the max line. Let it settle down. And replace the cover. The socket for the lug nuts is a 21 millimeter. Once I lower this to the ground, always tighten wheels in a star pattern. And our wheel torque on our 07 Mazda 3 is 87 foot-pounds. Always go around twice.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at 1AAuto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.